Alright gang, I think that Muscle Cars and Hot Rods first shop meeting, YouTube shop meeting, went pretty successfully. I think last time I looked there was something like 50 comments, so that was pretty cool. I consider that to be a success. So let's carry it on and do shop meeting number 2. And I thought that I'd start out by showing you what I won today. I won 2 snap-on bar stools on the tool truck. I bought a set of wobbly head. Here, let me get them. Hang on. Okay, so I bought a set of wobbly head 3/8 inch impact, the metric, and that was like $230 or something like that, which is expensive. I didn't want to do it. You should see this thing was going back and forth onto the shelf, but I ended up with it, and let me tell you, these things are awesome. I don't know why you would buy a standard impact if you had these available to you. These are very cool. So with the metric came along with it a small set of standards, which is very cool. And then to win 2 bar stools with that, I thought, hey, that's really cool. Other thing I wanted to show you was over here. This is my kneeling pad. And all it is a cover that, let's say, a bumper would come in. This is a Nissan bumper and this is a Toyota cover, so obviously that bumper didn't come on with it. But I just rolled it up, put a couple pieces of tape on it. It's good for kneeling. That was free and I recycled. There's less trash, whatnot. This baby right here is not free. That was probably 40, 50 bucks, 30 bucks, I don't know. Save, fellas, ladies, save yourself the money and take your girl out to dinner. That baby works really damn good. Suppose if I was real crafty, I could cut a little handle in it. So there it is. I like free tools. Okay, these right here are little bits of foam that come, like this came on the side of a hood to prevent any damage while shipping. Nice hard foam. I save stuff like this and use them all the time, whether it be for sanding blocks or this or that, or even setting the hood up on the ground, whatever. But also today, like when I'm buffing the edge of this door right here, I can just shove that foam in the jamb there, and it'll hold the edge of the door open, so that when I'm buffing, I don't burn through on the next panel. You only want to buff where you're intending to buff. So picking up from shop meeting number 1, some things we learned. I, for one, didn't know that, I guess Chevrolet, I'm not sure about Mopar and Ford, as early as the 60s and maybe even earlier, I didn't get a confirmed date or anything on that, they were dipping their cars in primer. When the bare metal was done, they were dipping their cars in primer, and so therefore, I mean, we all knew this, when you dip a car for stripping, it's getting dipped, and therefore all the paint and protection that's like up in the frame rails or in the rocker panels on a unibody, all that's being removed. So discussion there was, what do you do to protect that metal? And in most cases what you do is you grab a cavity gun, which is basically a paint gun with a long nozzle on it, and you shove that in a hole. And I suppose, like Messy Laura was suggesting, and this is how I would do it if I had the chance, I would start by etching it, and then I would put a coat of sealer in there, and then because sealer is not a true top coat and therefore doesn't seal from the elements, I would also put a coat of clear in there. So that's how I would take care of any things like frame rails and rocker panels in those areas that you can't get in to protect if I were to dip a car. So I started talking about how, I mean, even in this shop it varies among people. Ask Travis, he doesn't like dipping cars because the acid in between those pinch wells, if not fully neutralized and removed, continues to sit there and eat at your spot welds in your car. Something to consider. I also learned through the comments that were made is perhaps a new or amateur type refinisher wouldn't want to have a car dip because you got a ton of bare metal on your hands and a lot of stuff to deal with. So I mentioned that we use walnut shells now, and that's the most prevalent way, and it's just because of ease and quality, and it ends up being cheaper than we could manually strip a car. You see, at home I can afford all the time in the world and I could sit there and strip a car, but in the shop when you're charging an hourly rate, it ends up costing more to have me strip your car here at the shop than it is to ship it over to the walnut sheller and have it walnut shelled. But here's where, I think back, what was this, 4 or 5 years ago that we were having cars dipped, they were running around $1,400, and we can generally have a car walnut shelled for under 1,000, so let's say 700, 800, 900, somewhere in there. And here's where dipping becomes cheaper in that process. Let's say you got a 32 Ford Roadster or Coupe or whatever, and you get it walnut shelled. But when it's walnut shelled, if you get up close and inspect that metal, you're gonna most likely see little black specks in the pores of the metal, and that is rust. So when you get to that point, you've got to metal prep and kill that rust. And some of the products I use are SEM brands. When I want to kill rust, I use Rust Mort, M-O-R-T, Rust Mort. If I just want to seal some rust, perhaps on a control arm or a spindle or something, and I didn't have it sandblasted, it's got like a light coat of rust, similar to POR 15, I would use Rust Seal. And both those products are SEM brand. But ultimately, when you use a product like Rust Seal, it's a band-aid. It's only going to last for so long. And Cecil just did a video on some of the stuff that he uses for getting rid of rust, because getting rid of it is the #1 ultimate goal. That should be the best way to deal with it. And we used to have a little spot blaster with a hot spot collection system on it, and we could sit there and just get down into those pits and clean those little specks of rust out. You don't have to do any of that when you dip the car, because the phosphoric acid and the electrolysis take care of all that for you. So there's that. Now you've got your car back, it's been walnut shelled, it's been dipped, it's been whatever, it's been walnut shelled, you got to go through and metal prep. So let's talk about what we would do if we had a car all metal prepped. We would, at least I do, I sand the car down with a DA and 150 grit, and I do that to bring that metal up to a nice bright white clean, but I know that that is not strong enough to hold my sealers and my finish, so I have to go through and hit it with 80 grit. I'll use a DA as long as I keep that paper fresh and make sure it's given a mechanical tooth, but I'll also just take some of this, some Norton 80 grit, and I'll just hit it by hand as hard, and I'll give myself a tooth. At that point, barring any major metalwork areas, I like to get the car either etched and epoxied or just epoxied, depending on what your manufacturer recommends. And the reason I like to do that is because, let's say I've only got a little bit of metal work to do. Let's say I only got like a couple rust patches, or maybe put a quarter panel on. Well, while the rest of the car is sitting there in open metal and oxidizing, I'm sitting there doing my little bits of metal work. I don't like that. I'd rather take advantage of that fresh stripping and get that car in epoxy and sealed up, and then go back and do all my little bits of metal work. I could do all my filler and body work on top of my epoxy. Shouldn't be an issue. Some people talk about, does body work need to go directly on the metal with a little bit of 50 grit, or can it go on 80 grit and epoxy, or 80 grit with a little bit of 50 on epoxy? I haven't had any issues with putting body work on epoxy, and I haven't really had a ton of issues with putting body work directly on metal. Just make sure that it's feathering back. Let's see, which do I prefer? If it were my car and money were no object, I would take the epoxy route. I would get my car epoxied and sealed up, and then I would go back and do any bits of body work. You never know when you're gonna go to lunch, come back, forget to wash your hands, and set it somewhere on that bare metal, accidentally, walk away, and then go through and prime it and miss that spot. You want to minimize that type of stuff as much as possible. So Greg Porter did a series that he did some research where he found a guy who was claiming that bodywork sticks better to metal than it does to epoxy primer. And there's probably two things you can think of is, yeah, maybe that bodywork does stick better, but now is that metal corrosive protected better or not? I would say that with the epoxy straight on the metal, your metal is cleaned, it's more protected than just open bodywork, because we know that bodywork can act like a sponge. Spill a little bit of water onto Bondo, it'll suck it right up and bring it right to that metal base and start rusting. There's that. If you do any welding, make sure you either epoxy over the welds before you put regular bodywork down, or use short strand fiberglass, whether it be Marglass, Everglass, whatever, Duraglass. Because let's say you missed a pinhole. If you got just straight body filler there, there's no waterproofing, there's no corrosive protection, and the water will go right through that pinhole and start rusting on that metal and push that bodywork away from the surface of the metal. There's just some thoughts, some of my opinions. I want to be corrected here. I want to be shown the right way. I want to tap into the knowledge of YouTube, and I want to come away from this video a better technician, and I want for you guys watching this video to become better technicians through this type of setup. As always, I'll open up, or not as always, but on these types of videos, I'll open up the video responses. If you want to make a video with your thing, you can go there. Otherwise, leave a comment, leave a question, and hopefully someone will get around to answering it for you. I'm hoping some of the rest of the guys out there making these videos picks up on the shop meeting, the YouTube shop meeting, and starts making videos on it. I'm gonna go ahead and go home. I'm the only one here, and there's still a little bit of daylight out there. My work's pretty much done. This side of the 57 four-door is all polished out. The trunk and driver side of the 57 four-door is all compounded out. Just got our last two pads to finish up. And then I believe we can start putting trim on it before we get our fenders in place. That's gonna wrap up this video. We'll catch you on the next one.